And I think that's what this show is all about, is just, it's for the overly ambitious girls, you know? Because what you said is like...
That's the tagline right there.
You know,
for the overly ambitious girls.
Literally.
That's cute.
So I am here with an iconic photographer and photojournalist, Ngala. Yay. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thank you.
So honored. I mean...
Thank you you just called me iconic. That's quite a intro adjective.
Yeah, you are. You really are. Your portfolio is extremely impressive. I mean, we're here in Miami. We just wrapped up Art Basel. And I know that you just recently made the move from New York City to Miami, which is so funny because I just moved from Miami to New York City. So what prompted you to make that move?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. You guys can't see the view, but it's like a fabulous, like, you know, just classic Miami like skyfront. And I feel like, yeah, to answer your question, that's part of what prompted me to make the move. Just wanting to see something different. You know, a big part of, you know, even this morning, actually, me and my like partner were talking about like dreams and how like it feels real, but our eyes are closed. And so like a big part of like life and how we can live our life is really a reflection of what we're seeing. And like they say the eyes are a window to the soul, and I think for whatever reason that I'm gravitated towards certain kinds of you know, work or things I photograph and shoot, I realized at a certain point, okay, like what I'm seeing and what's around me is definitely affecting, you know, how my lifestyle is, how my mental health is. So I definitely wanted to just kind of like be someplace that was a bit more closer to nature. Yeah. And I felt also like with photography, there was more stuff.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, do you feel like there are more opportunities for you here as a photographer?
I wouldn't say more, just I think different kinds. Like I really did a list. I was in London like last week for an award show, and I literally sat in the hotel room. I'm a very ambitious traveler. Like I think I'll go someplace and be like, okay, I'm gonna get my whole life together, all my work. I'm gonna come back a new person. I do that like consciously. It's actually a terrible habit. But when I was there, I wrote down like a list of like different kinds of photography I wanted to do, and then also just like all the things I want to be. And I came up with like 40 things. Like, it was like host, model, brand ambassador, fitness guru, this. But with photography specifically, in Miami, I realized like real estate. / architectural photography, something, I don't know, the Selling Sunset girl in me is like fascinated by that, you know? You know, there's obviously like profiles, like editorial profiles, portraitures, a lot of nightlife scenes here that could be interesting. In the event space, there's always like, something, you know, something going on here. And then, I don't know, something to me about there being a space where for 3 or 4 months of the year where like the East Coast is very cold, people are still just like doing business, still moving around. Like obviously there's like, you know, hurricane season. I know like there's other things I have to look out for. But I feel like it'll be fun to just not feel like I'm in hibernation mode. Yeah, and, like actually can still, you know, move around.
I can imagine that your environment is obviously super important as a photographer. And I know that a lot of people are making the move right now from like bigger cities like Chicago, New York to Florida, but specifically Miami. I've been hearing a lot about Miami becoming the new New York City, especially in like the financial sector. But do you feel like that's gonna become a thing for creative industries as well?
About Miami specifically? I feel like the way that like globalization and moving around works is like in cycles, right? Like there's like kind of migrations for different reasons, different times. You know how like there's a Super Bowl and like there's an influx of money spent in that city because a bunch of people went there to like do something. I feel like there's also ripple effects of things like that, you know, certain people become famous and then all of a sudden like, you know, Kentucky gets put on the map because Jack Harlow, you know, is a, you know, Grammy nominated or maybe like award winning, you know, artist and so there. So I feel like, you know, Texas, Houston, for example, we saw like a bunch of people migrate that way. Mexico City, like, you know, we're seeing that. So I feel like, you know, there's all these different cause and effects that cause things to like rotate out of maybe like relevance, if that makes sense. And it's just about like, I don't know, where the money's at for some people, where the industry's at. Like I think if I asked you like, well, why'd you move to New York? I'm sure your answers would be
Everybody has their reasons.
Why did you move to New York, actually?
I know, it's like, I feel like we're biased because where you grow up, you kind of get tired of it and you don't see the magic of it. But to me, I feel like New York is the place for anything creative, you know. I feel like
it is.
That's
no, it
where,
is.
you know. But I can imagine for somebody who grew up in New York City and who has worked there their entire life, that a change of environment, you know, a change in pace could be good for you. And like I said, your portfolio was so impressive. I mean, you have shot with everybody from Cardi B to Burna Boy to Sarah Jessica Parker, Stacey Abrams, Kim Kardashian. You have, shot for the New York Times Magazine, for Essence, for Billboard. This is just a little introduction so that we can, we can dive into it a little bit later. But I do really want to talk about your upbringing before we get into more of your recent successes. So you are the child of two immigrants, Cameroonian and Nigerian, which I love because I'm Cameroonian myself.
Yeah,
so
that's so fire.
I know, and I feel like I don't meet many Cameroonians.
No, really.
And I love to
But you look it, like, you could be like a cousin of mine or something.
Yeah, I know.
But also, you can be Nigeria. I mean, Cameroon and Nigeria share a border. I feel like everyone can be from everywhere.
I know.
It just depends.
But we very well could be cousins. You never know.
Are you from well, actually, no, keep going.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. So, I wanted to know, because you grew up in Harlem, right? So how do you think that your environment and your background has influenced you and your career?
I feel like there was nothing that made it more clear than last year when I actually went back to Nigeria for the first time. And even though Nigeria and Cameroon are, their own respective countries, and even, within those countries, the states and the towns are all, very, nuanced. I felt like it gave me a glimpse of, the reality, which is like, I had an American experience. I had an incredibly African American, Black American experience, and unfortunately, at the expense of my knowledge of my language, my foods, my cultures, and then I also unfortunately lost a parent. I just turned 13, so he was the closer tie to our culture. Parents are different, especially with immigration. It's very beneficial to the next generation, because we get to have this different life. But it can be very heartbreaking, for our parents. And whether you're from Southeast Asia, I don't know, South America, Africa, wherever, it's people never speak to their families again. They don't see their friends. They don't see their childhood. They lose parts of their culture, but their kids have a better life. And then we grow up and we do whatever, excuse my language, what the fuck we want. And then it's we're American, get with the program. So I feel for me, I realized oh, okay, Harlem is what I know and where I'm from, but at the same time, it's a completely different world. 99% of my family, this is not their experience.
No, at all.
So that's really weird. And I think I'm just now getting used to it. And I feel part of me moving around and traveling as a photographer has been a blessing, because it's allowed me to just become more of a global citizen, I feel than just a New Yorker. And I think even though New York is such a global melting pot, you can find a lot of people who will just never go below 96th Street or never leave Queens or never leave Flatbush.
That's crazy to me.
And it's, I mean, you probably can relate to that as far as any city. Yeah, and so it's kind of crazy. So when you make it off the block, so to speak, or you make it to a different, space or environment, it's very but it should be part of the American experience, and it should be part of the Black experience and the African experience. So I don't know. I'm grateful for the duality of
Yeah, I try to see the beauty in it, because I resonate with everything that you just said so much. Just being a second generation African, I think it's a very unique experience, and it's a very specific experience. And I find it really interesting because I know that there's a huge African influence in Harlem. There's a huge African community in New York in general. Growing up in Florida, I feel I was not surrounded by other Africans at all, lots of Caribbeans, but not Africans. So I would feel you're even closer, I'm even more far removed from my culture, and I'm very aware of that. But yeah, you've spoken a lot, you spoke out about your parents' entrepreneurial spirits also rubbing off on you. So tell me a little bit about that, because Africans, I feel inherently we are very driven goal-driven people. So I want to know how you think that affected you.
So, well, first of all, my dad, he was basically like a brilliant salesman. Like, if you think about like a market, a classic marketplace, the art of finesse is like, especially if you're someone who's from, not just like any African country. If you think, again, about India, Asia, parts of Latin America, like the idea of like trying to get something for a cheap
negotiation.
Yeah, negotiation, yeah. So I heard my dad, my mom do that a lot because you go to the hair braiding salon, like you're trying to get, the better deal. So all that being said, I was a fly on the wall of those conversations. And then my dad had a calling card center. My mom, was the, kind of lead hair braider at this like braiding salon. Like to this day, I can walk down 125th Street and people will recognize me from, just growing up like in a store or like growing up knowing my parents because the store they owned was the kind of biggest like store in the biggest hair braiding beauty supply store in Harlem at the time. Wow. And that was for at least about like 5 to 7 years. It was like prime real estate. Like Lenox Avenue is like the main strip. It's like Broadway. And they were across the street from this place called Sylvia's, which was like, and still is like the
That's a
most,
restaurant, right?
Yeah, it's like the most famous restaurant. So it was literally where Sylvia's was across the street. And there's 125th Street right there. Bill Clinton, like he was the president from like, I should know this, 96 to 04, something like that. Some kind of range. So it was like, a very like Harlem time. And it was kind of like, I don't know, something about just being their kid and seeing them still get kind of some forms of discrimination because there is still this kind of rift between like Africans who are first generation immigrants and people who are born and raised in this country or like are, African American versus African, that's like, tricky conversation, but it is a conversation that like, it's a reality. So I feel like I remember, just times where, who they were, how they dressed, how they acted, like what we were like, the languages they spoke. Yeah, it was like, it wasn't like, that cool. So I feel like being able to hold their own and have that sense of pride. I know I'm kind of rambling a bit.
It's very
but I feel
inspiring
like,
though for you, yeah.
Yeah, it's inspiring, and I think when it comes to entrepreneurship, that kind of identity and that authenticity gets you really far. So I think that definitely rubbed off.
Oh my God, I want to talk about authenticity in a second, but I do just want to bring up the fact that because you're talking about this entrepreneurial mindset, this influence that you got from your parents, and now you're starting your own creative agency. So I kind of want to know what you're trying to do with that,
She's good.
and your marketing and your the strategy behind it. So
oh my gosh, so exciting. Well, I guess this is the first time I'm kind of talking about it on camera.
Yeah,
or maybe not. But I've decided to take my entrepreneurial spirit and energy into my kind of first love for creativity, which was creative direction, art direction, and creative strategy. And I think many people may or may not know that I went to school like not knowing I was going to become a photographer. I majored in communications. I did advertising / PR, digital design. So I guess I always had this like sales-ish vibe. And I think part of how I approached my career, like when I was around people, was like I was never afraid to like market myself or like just talk about myself. But I found a way to do it that was like charming, I just like talking, whatever. So my point being with the idea for flow and focus, I just felt like, I don't know, there was people or companies who were asking me to work with them in a certain way, and I found like, I don't know, even though I'm not fully the entrepreneur yet that I want to be, because I need to like work on a few things, I felt like there was an opportunity for me to still have like many roles or play many parts in the creative projects that were coming into my lap, and I felt like I knew how to do it because I had kind of been doing it on my own for a little while. But I think everyone picks up like different parts of like working in a team, especially when we're younger, because we're learning how to do something. So a lot of times you have to be scrappy. And so you kind of probably learn, you probably know how to produce more than you think, or you probably know how to location scout more than you think, or you probably know how to like, you know, do expenses or like invoicing and or whatever it is
Yeah.
more. So I think if you think about a platform given to someone, like I was given a platform as a young person. I know a lot of like great, you know, execs and celebrities and stuff because I've worked for them as a photographer. Given that platform and given that like respect of like, okay, now I have receipts for me doing that well consistently. What does that look like in, you know, 5 years or 10 years? If I can think ahead and be like, all right, you know, do I just want to keep being the person people call to take pictures? Or do I want to be the person that like, you know, can step back and be like, oh, I know how to direct this. I know how to produce this. I know who we should hire. I know, you know, who deserves a chance at working with.
It's a much
you
more
know,
influential role.
Yeah, and it's very exciting. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I really have been on some really great sets with some really cool people very casually. I think I've normalized it because that's part of the job is like, you know, you're just there to do the job.
Yeah.
But I feel like the opportunity and the blessing is not something I want to keep to myself. Yeah, especially because people really are like, whatever you need. Like people are very like willing
Helpful,
to work.
right.
Yeah, and they really want to make it, you know, and people need opportunities. So
Yeah.
I feel like, not that that's the point of what I'm doing, but I feel like I remember how important it was for someone to give me a chance and me to run with it. And I feel like it's important to just, now that I see a way for me to multiply that, I feel like it's important for me to do that. Especially while I have the energy and I'm like,
For sure.
kind of like still young and hot.
Yeah.
Like,
Sexy.
right, I'm like,
No,
when I
yeah.
get an ass like in a few years, I can be like, okay, phew.
Yeah.
Glad I got that out the way.
Yeah. So at 22, you decided that you wanted to become a full-time photographer,
Yeah.
right?
I didn't really have a choice.
Okay. It was just the ball was rolling, so you were like, this is what I'm gonna do.
Literally the person who was in charge of like Cardi B's everything was like, why are you getting a job? And I was like,
I don't know, really.
no, I was like,
Yeah.
are you gonna? I mean, I didn't know what to say. Like, I was like, of course, like, you know.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as consistent as I wanted it to be, but I guess I kind of had to like give it a shot.
Yeah, no, because I want to know, like,
Yeah.
because I'm 22 right now, right?
That's insane.
And I feel like I'm in this chapter of my life that I feel like is defined by so much uncertainty and just always feeling like I don't really know if I'm doing the right thing. I don't really know what I'm doing, you know? So it's like I want to know how you kind of got past that fear of unknown that a lot of 20-something-year-olds feel, especially coming out of college.
You know how like you go to college and then like, I don't know, or not even college. Let's say like, you know how like you go on a trip and you're like anxious about the trip, and then all of a sudden you're on your way home. That's really what life is. Like, you know, and every day, if you just really take that idea of like take things day by day, which everyone tells you, like before you know it, the day is over, right? Like it's 7 o'clock in the morning, then it's 7 at night. Like that's just what it is.
Yeah.
So the idea of like anxiety, I think for me, now that I look back, because I'm talking to you, and to me, I wouldn't even guess you were 22. Like you have like the maturity and poisedness and whatever the anxieties that you deal with daily or things you think about. Like, first of all, 99% of people don't give a shit because we're worried about our own stuff.
Right.
Like the other 1% who give a shit enough to maybe listen and care probably still won't be with you at those moments where you need like to really make the decisions. It's really about you and yourself and like those moments of like, all right, like, you know, how am I talking to myself? What am I doing? Like, how do I feel? So my point is just that if you are 22 or 23 or whatever the age is, like 28 to me still is like, I'm young. I'm like,
Very
you know,
much.
I'm not tripping, but at the same time, I feel like the advice would probably just be like, you just really have to think about like what's the return on like investment of like the anxiety? Like, is it actually worth it? Does it actually solve the problem? Or do I end up like having to deal with it anyway? Do I end up like on the other side of it anyway? And if you always end up on the other side of it, then like, you know, imagine how much energy you would save if you just kind of like focused on just like, you know, people go to the gym and they're like, fuck, I gotta go to the gym. But then they always are happy that they went. Yeah. You know, because all it is just like going on a treadmill and just like getting it done. Yeah. So not to look at life like that, but if you got anything out of what I just said, I feel like the point is just, you know, I got through whatever I thought was like the end of the world, which is like being 22 and not taking a real job because someone said you should photograph Cardi B. I probably didn't make, on paper as much money as like I wanted to, but I ended up getting a career that I'm super fucking proud of. I ended up
and happy with.
Yeah, and proud. Yeah, and I'm still figuring out like what those other anxieties are that we're still at 22, which is like, oh, you know, doing your taxes the right way. Oh, like saving money. Oh, investment. Blah blah blah. But ultimately, like, if you're able to just understand that, like I said, things are cycles. You get through it. life goes on,
Yeah.
I really think that like it's more worth it and healthy for you as a human being.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
That was kind of long, but I'm happy that made sense.
But it was good though. Yeah, because I feel like
I'm asking the people who are like stuck in the room with me rambling.
Right.
They're like, oh, this girl.
So going back to the whole authenticity conversation, because I feel like maintaining authenticity nowadays is just a little more difficult than it used to be in this era of things just being so curated and staged. So I want to know, like, how do you maintain professionalism, but also stay true to your vision at the same time and to your values? Because I feel like it can be difficult to do.
Well, how do you define authentic? Do you mean authenticity like my vision, values, or do you mean authenticity like being myself? Because I feel like they're different.
Both. I do mean both. Okay, so they are different. Like your values and what you see as important and the things that you want to push, the impact that you want to make, but also just staying true to yourself and not letting yourself be swayed by what people expect from you, if that makes sense.
So you're asking kind of like where that and professionalism meet for me? Well, okay, this is going to be kind of like annoying, but I'm a Taurus moon. So I feel like my inner...
Taurus rising.
Yeah, I feel like my inner person is pretty grounded. That's why I asked, like, how do you define... And I'm a first generation American. Like, my values are pretty, like, prude. You know what I mean? Like, they're pretty, like, on paper. So there's that. But my personality is quite... I'm a Gemini, like, Leo rising. It's quite flamboyant. It's quite, like, extra. So the reason why I asked that is because the balance to me, like, it really works. And we talked about duality and, you think about the idea of code switching or double consciousness or like whatever. Life is really not about like a one-sidedness. Like executives like who make billions of dollars like go out and get drunk, like, for happy hours. Everyone loves to drink. Or they get in trouble for doing like worse things, like, So there's always two sides, of everything. And I think for me the juxtaposition of things is very necessary for business and for anything because like one, you miss out on 50% of like the other half if you just don't ever think about the other half, and then two, you just miss another avenue, another way to kind of like
to get to where you want to go.
Exactly.
Right.
So for me, like this brings in certain kinds of whatever, and then the flip side of that is like I really do have a very formal like, educational background. I always say I probably could have been a lawyer or would have been a lawyer if I didn't go into creative work. So people may see like the photos or the creative stuff and think, oh wow, art is fun. But for me personally, like I grew up in an African household. Like I said, like, I'm very kind of grounded in lots of ways. So I think you, but anyone, just needs to understand their balance, understand their duality, and then understand how to make it work for them. Like I kind of use one or the other more than the rest. But I think that's why you can say, oh yeah, you shot like, Gucci Mane and like been like in a party with Bobby Shmurda, working for GQ. Oh, but you've also like been on calls and made a lot of money working with Bank of America and like Apple and like the New York Times. Because there is like you have to see both sides, And I think as a photographer, like if you really had like a therapist or a psychologist watch this, the black and white, like that's the whole point. Both sides. So that's how my mind, I guess, works by accident.
No, I think that's really important. And it's also just
highlights and shadows.
Hello. And it gives you space to breathe. It doesn't always have to be so. You don't always have to be so strict with yourself, but then at the same time, that professional side of you aids you in other ways. So I understand that duality. I feel like I have that in me as well.
Good. No, feed into that. That's how, you think about like women, like powerful women, like they kind of like lead with like whatever, but then they always are the ones in the background that are like, don't fuck with them.
Exactly.
And like they don't, they know how to move.
Yeah, I love that.
And men too, I'm sure men know how to work with that too.
Yeah. So I want us to discuss fashion a little bit because I mean, even just the way you're dressed right now, I feel like it's just very clear that, it's very clear in general that you're multifaceted and multi-passionate, right? So I want to know how how does the intersection of these two passions kind of play out in your career, and how does it affect your work? And then also, I want us to go into, because you told me that you're working on music as well. So I feel like you just do so much, and I want to know how you plan to weave them all together.
Yeah, I think, you know, all of us are like expressive beings. If you look at like kids, or like your nieces and nephews, you can like kind of tell like, oh, that one's like really like loud, or that one's really funny, or that one's really silly, whatever. So I think the different kinds of parts of me that are coming out now, I don't know if it's because I turned like another age. Like I turned 28 on the 28th this year. And they said it was like Saturn return or something. Or like something like...
It's gotta mean something.
Something cosmic, yeah. So I feel like a part of me is like very, maybe like evolving, like shedding. You know, animals shed. It's part of that. And I think as far as the fashion thing, you know what's funny? When I moved to Miami recently, I paid someone to literally come and help me like get rid of some of my clothes. Because I started hoarding like lots of clothes. It's really sad, but like I love clothes way too much. And I've wasted a lot of money on things I just don't wear. Yeah. And so I just kept like looking at the things and I just liked them, but I didn't wear them. Yeah. And it felt like baggage. You know, it really felt like baggage. And it felt like heavy, like to just literally carry shit all over. Yes. And people just look at like, wow, you have a lot of stuff. And I'm like, I know, I don't wear half of it. Yeah. So anyway, the fashion, that's kind of one answer. I kind of answered a little bit of the expression part. I'm going to answer the music part and then I'll bring it together.
I know it's a lot of questions.
Yeah, I know, it's good. It's a good question. But the music part, I think just naturally, I kind of mentioned to you, and I guess I'll share with the viewers as well. Is that what you were talking about with the music that I mentioned?
The Cameroonian.
Yeah. So with that, like I hope to kind of focus on, I wanted to just be a DJ, but my friend was like, you should just start a collective because you don't have time to DJ. But I want to just kind of revive or like bring back like a lot of sounds and like music that I think a lot of people don't know about, don't hear about, that come from Cameroon. So that's
Is it Makossa?
Yeah, exactly. That's the music thing she's talking about. So all those things, like I said, to kind of go back to being childlike and stuff, you know, you kind of are already born, or, you know, they say nature versus nurture. You're born or kind of inherit the things that you really be passionate about, like, and part of, I think, what a lot of us get stuck on is like trying to be like single dimensional, because like the world like wants us to be like, okay, are you applying for a job as like, you know, a secretary or, you know, a lawyer, you know? And it's like, actually, those are just different mediums to express yourself, but like you're not defined.
It's not who I am.
Yeah, it's just a description of like something I can do. So I think, to answer the question and wrap it up, the creative expression, the creatives of the world are lucky because we get to, if you're willing to, you know, sacrifice like, you know, having stability or like getting paid every 2 weeks or like, you know, having health insurance and stuff, like we get to kind of like ebb and flow a little bit more because like we're the ones that, like navigating it, versus if you work maybe the more standard 9 to 5 or have a description, they have other people who are paid to do that. Yeah. And there's a lot of accountability. There's a lot of like, don't overstep, don't offend, don't like do too much, don't, you know? So all that being said, yeah, I think that's why I think the agency will be fun, because like I get to finally be like, all right, I want to also be the boss. Yeah. And I also want to like dictate like how these different expressions I have are done, how these different creative things are done. And yeah, we'll see how that goes. But I'm excited for like all of the things to come together.
I love that. Oh my gosh. If you're going to be responsible for Makossa coming back, I will have so much appreciation for you, because I interviewed a DJ a few months ago, and she's Liberian, and we were just talking about how
Mahogany?
A lot of she's
awesome.
Yes, shout out.
Mahogany.
Yes, and we were just talking about how a lot of, you know, Francophone music and a lot of just music that's outside of the norm is just not the norm, obviously. So it's like I could really see that coming back and see that being
It's going to be so fun. Sometimes I just listen to the playlist and the things that I curate, and I'm like, honestly, I like this stuff enough that like if I just stopped doing photography for like 3 months and took it seriously, I keep telling my boyfriend, I'm like, I could just blow up as a DJ. You don't believe me. Yeah. But it's really cool, and I think people also like, you know, people like seeing beautiful women do anything.
Yeah.
And I think,
especially DJ, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I think especially with the DJ, frenzy that has continued to happen, I think it's fun to kind of see what happens when women come from behind, like Uncle Waffles is a good example, or like, people who put the dancing and the movement behind the actual music.
Yeah.
So I hope that more DJs feel empowered to do that, and fuck it, become acts of your own. But specifically with Makossa, Sukus, Coupe de Calais, Zulu, the different, the different names of genres, and then the different countries, which are Ivory Coast, Cameroon, obviously. There's like Somali in there, and there's like mostly like Congo though, and with all that, I'm excited to also see like what kind of empowerment that may bring to those communities in those countries. That's a big ask for me. I know it might sound like really extra, but I keep thinking like I can't be out here just playing this music and like having fun and not find a way to also like actually empower and help back home. So I guess, I don't know, maybe it's ambitious to be like, oh, you want to start a collective and DJ, you want to play this music, and you also want to like help back home. But I also feel like, the whole point is that people should know that this kind of music and sound was birthed there, and it shouldn't be forgotten, because it's like, I'm not going to say it's like equal to Afrobeats, it's just a different thing. But if people are looking at African music and care and want to listen to it, then
they should listen to that too.
I mean, that's I think that's what Nigerians and South Africans and everyone owes to each other, because at the end of the day, if people are now spending more money, and more time investing in like their eyes just paying attention to Wizkid or Thames or Tyler or I'm saying just the big names, but there's so many others whose lives have changed, who've changed their communities, who've started schools, who empowered. Like I just spoke at like not to flex, but I spoke at Columbia University like a few weeks ago, and I was in the panel with like a manager who like was part of this like collective, and I was in the panel with like a curator at the Brooklyn Museum who's like from South Africa, and I was on the panel with like all these people who had like their masters, and like we were all sitting there, and I was like, wow, these people all were born somewhere on the continent and cared enough to like use their the brilliance and their gift, right? Like which we hopefully we're both doing. Use that to pour back into it. So all that being said, I think with music, that's why I can't help but be like, all right, well, I'm already a celebrity photographer. I already have some clout. People are gonna care about it. But how can I actually like do more than just get have fun and party off of it?
Right. Absolutely.
So, thanks for letting me get that
significant.
That was long.
No, you needed to, and I think that's so significant and important, and I admire that you're doing that a lot.
Thank you.
I look at you and I see that. I see the expressiveness, and I see especially the fashion, and just being that you are the first Black woman to be commissioned by Vogue to shoot the Met Gala. I think that in and of itself, it's already such a huge accomplishment, but I think that must be just so rewarding to somebody who is also very passionate about fashion. So it's like, I feel like you have these very genuine passions for what you do. So you're the kind of person who should be in charge of, how these things are expressed.
Thank
so
you.
I think it's really cool that you're doing that. And then I wanted to ask,
stick with me, thank you.
Yeah, and then so it's interesting because you're behind the camera a lot of the time, right? And like at the Met Gala, you're like at these events. But then I also heard you mention that you want to get into modeling. So what is the?
I'm doing the most.
Like you really just do everything.
You guys,
it's so inspiring.
We're literally gonna be here for like the
hours.
universe is gonna. The universe but the universe blinks and we're gone. It's like actually kind of crazy. Yeah, no, it's unfortunate, but it's like there's only. The billionaires are billionaires because they wanted to be billionaires. Yeah. Like, the people just decided to. So anyway.
It's about making a decision though.
Let me let you ask your question before I start.
No, I mean, there was really no question. I just wanted to acknowledge that you're doing so much. And I think that's what this show is all about. It's for the overly ambitious girls, Because what you said is like...
That's the tagline right there. For the overly ambitious girls.
Literally.
That's cute.
Because it's so hard, like you said, in a society that tries to push just doing one thing and just taking a conventional route. I think it's really important to see people taking the route less traveled and to see people stepping outside of that norm, because it shows that it is possible and it shows that it's something that you can do. So, yeah, I just appreciate you for being you, honestly, because that's something that we need to see.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the modeling thing and the photographer thing,
Yeah.
genuinely, like, people really have inspired me to take that more seriously. Like, literally, that's a blessing. And I'm thankful for my community and the people who, you know, have just been like, yo, like, you know, I don't know, whatever it is. Even when I'm working, sometimes there'll be times where I'm like, damn, like, people are really, like, giving me my flowers. So I feel like, I don't know, for whatever reason, I've not taken that more seriously sooner. I'll just have to go to therapy and talk about that. But, yeah, my parents, they were, like, you know, they were a fire couple. And when I was younger, I'm not going to lie, people really did, like, say little things to them. But I think maybe, I don't know, probably insecurity, probably I just got ahead of myself. I'm also not really a beauty girl. Like, the girls were like, skin girls, beauty girls.
That's
like,
not you.
That's just not me yet.
But
like,
you
I
know
was
what?
I was an athlete girl. I was like a kind of like whatever, like I don't really care.
I feel like the
I
modeling
think models
industry
are
has changed so
also-
much, though, at the same time, that, like, it's not just the beauty girls anymore. It's not just the conventional, you know, beauties. And I think that that's what really pushed me towards modeling, was feeling like, oh, okay, I'm
But you
seeing
do have the
people-
conventional beauty look.
But so do you, if we're really going to be honest then. Like, we said
But that's
we look
why
like
I
cousins.
think. But that's
It's
also
a
why I
mindset
think.
too.
But that's also why I think I couldn't take myself doing it, because to me, since I think I perceive myself as that, I felt like I needed to fit more of like the whole picture. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it was like a face thing.
Okay, I
So I
see.
was like, okay, now I have to just give the whole thing.
Yeah.
I can't just be like one of the.
I have to give model. you
Yeah.
know? Yeah. No, and that's important. Like, it is.
You know?
And I was going to go into personal branding because not only as a model is that obviously everything and thinking of yourself as a business, but then as a photographer, I feel like nowadays it's actually really important to have a personal brand and like a vibe to you that clients can recognize and come back to.
Yeah.
So how do you achieve that?
I think back to what we were talking about before, really just being myself. You know, I think it's tricky because my boyfriend and I were actually just talking about this. Like, some people are in the music industry who are cool. Some people go into the music industry to be cool. And then, like, it's funny, even in high school, like, you think about the people who are popular because, like, they're cool. People who are popular because they're rich. People who are popular because they're popular.
Just like real life.
Yeah, it's really just like real life. And even at the Met Gala, like, one of my favorite, I really hope they coin me for being like, the Met Gala is just like high school. But I literally will never forget, like, when Kim walks through, it's like a different thing. You know, like, I turn around and it's like, okay, like, I remember like Stormzy and like Damson Idris and Jacob Elordi, the guy from Insecure.
Euphoria.
Yeah, they're all just like buddies. So I feel like it's always just like a jocks versus cheerleaders versus whatever. So in terms of real life, I think in high school, I won like most artsy, biggest hipster. Like, I was always this kind of person, expressive, whatever. And so I do think part of that, like, you know, I would be ignorant to just be like, yeah, I've been flowing. I really do think people are like, oh wow, this girl's either like
that
really
is
weird,
brand.
or really interesting, or really talkative, or really witty, or whatever, and they really are just intrigued by that. But I think that still comes from me just being expressive, being myself, being open with that. My parents, I think, also, just to go back to them really quick, did kind of steer the way for me to be that. At that same store I mentioned that we were at, they would make us do like talent shows. They would make us like give speeches to the customers. Like, we would literally do like fake talent shows. Like, my sister would sing.
That stuff is significant.
It's significant, and it does stick with you. You know, even with like I don't know if you saw, I was a figure skater.
I did.
Yeah, so I was a figure skater.
Yeah,
it was a whole random other thing.
And I found it so interesting that that moment kind of came full circle for you when you had to come back and kind of document them for the New York Times and photograph them.
Yeah.
And I think moments like that are just so cool because it's a full circle moment, and it just shows how your passions can lead you to other passions and other interests and hobbies.
Yeah. And also, like, it shows that the people who are watching, you know, you never know which, like, just to go back to why it's important to be all the parts of yourself and express all the parts of yourself, you never know what you're missing if you don't look at the other side of the coin, if you don't, like, try the other things. Just even with Miami, right? With Art Basel, I got to work with Paramount executives to announce a new show I'm doing for next year called Harlem Hip Hop Hollywood. But the person who put me onto that was one of the co-honorees from the figure skating thing. So she met me in a completely different capacity.
Yeah.
Was a co-honoree, literally was like, you know, senior vice president, like something fancy.
Yeah.
Something fancy.
Yeah.
But her name is Crystal Barnes. Shout out to Crystal Barnes and to Melissa C. Potter. They both were, you know, executives who, in me trying to just find like a space and place to get this done, to get I wanted to put the show out, I wanted to do this thing. They, and Crystal helped because she was someone who I shared with, you know, who I was outside of just figure skating, who I was beyond, you know, the photography thing, the creative thing. So yeah, it's just important to put everything forward.
For sure, yeah. Well, hey, thank you so much
Thank
for coming
you.
and sharing your story and sharing your insight. Thank you. And all your advice. I think it's really important, like I said, to just see people like you doing their thing. It's very inspiring, and yeah.
Thank you.
I appreciate
Thank
you
you
for
to your
making the
team
time.
for waiting and being patient genuinely.
you.
And this was great. All the
Thank
best
you.
to you, and I can't wait for.
You did good.
Yeah, no, we did well,
Thank
girl. We
you.
did that. You guys can follow me at Vogue and Ngala, FLONGALA. Same on my website, floandgala.com, and Twitter as well. TikTok's not really a thing.
Are you serious? You don't use TikTok?
Not really.
TikTok is everything.
I know. I'm asleep.